Lying inside it was a tiny mummy that British Egyptologist Joanne Fletcher had controversially claimed was the legendary Queen Nefertiti.
In 1912, German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt and his team discovered the painted bust of Queen Nefertiti inside the ruined city of Amarna, Egypt. And it quickly became one of the world's most famous ancient treasures. But behind its flawless face lay one of Egypt's greatest unsolved mysteries. For more than 100 years, scientists could study only its surface. When scientists finally examined the bust with high-resolution CT scans in 2022, what they found beneath the beautiful face was something completely unexpected. A face with wrinkles, different facial features, and details that had remained hidden for more than 3,300 years. And even that wasn't the biggest surprise. The discovery raised new questions about the queen we thought we already knew, and why her lost tomb has never been found. So what did scientists uncover? And why is it changing the story of Nefertiti forever? Let's dive in. The most powerful queen. 3,300 years ago, Egypt was one of the richest and most powerful kingdoms on earth. Its empire stretched from modern-day Syria in the north to deep into Nubia. In present-day Sudan, the gold mines of Nubia supplied enormous amounts of gold to the pharaoh's treasury, to kingdoms across the Near East. And all of this wealth helped fund massive temples, towering statues, royal tombs, and some of the greatest monuments the ancient world had ever seen. But these monuments were more than displays of power. They were built to honor the gods. Religion wasn't just a part of life. It was life itself. The Egyptians worshipped dozens of gods because they believed these gods controlled everything, from the rising of the sun to the flooding of the Nile and even what happened after death. For more than 2,000 years, they worshipped dozens of gods, and every pharaoh ruled as the protector of this sacred order. At the center of that change stood a young pharaoh named Akhenaten and his great royal wife, Queen Nefertiti. They attempted something no ruler in Egyptian history had ever dared before. After becoming pharaoh around 1353 BCE, Akhenaten rejected the old religion that had guided Egypt for more than 2,000 years. He declared that the kingdom would worship only one god, Aten. It became one of the most dramatic religious revolutions in ancient Egyptian history. To build this new world, Akhenaten did something even more extraordinary. He abandoned Egypt's ancient royal capital and ordered the construction of an entirely new city in the desert. It was called Akhenaten. Around 1343 BCE, it became the heart of a new religion, a new government, and a new way of life. One thing made this revolution even more unusual. Nefertiti was not just the pharaoh's wife. She stood beside him as an equal partner in this extraordinary transformation. She wore the royal blue crown. She appeared beside Akhenaten in public rituals, and artists carved her image on temple walls almost as often as the pharaoh himself. She was even shown striking down Egypt's enemies, a role traditionally reserved only for kings. No Egyptian queen before her had ever been portrayed with such authority. And that's why historians started asking, how much power did Nefertiti really hold? Some researchers believe that after Akhenaten's death, she may even have ruled Egypt herself. Although that theory remains debated, historians agree on one thing. Nefertiti became one of the most powerful women in ancient Egyptian history. Then, almost as suddenly as she had risen to power, she disappeared. After Akhenaten died around 1336 BCE, Egypt quickly abandoned Aten, restored the old religion. Nefertiti also vanished from the historical record. It was as if she had been erased from history. But more than 3,000 years later, one remarkable discovery would bring Nefertiti back into the spotlight: a beautiful face. On December 6, 1912, German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt and his team were excavating the ruins of Tel el Amarna, the abandoned city built by Akhenaten centuries earlier. Inside the remains of an ancient sculptor's workshop, they uncovered something extraordinary. A beautifully painted limestone bust. One detail immediately caught their attention. The sculpture carried no inscription, nothing that identified the woman it portrayed. Yet its tall blue crown and its unmistakable royal appearance all pointed toward one person: Queen Nefertiti. Archaeologists became increasingly convinced they had found the face of Egypt's most famous queen. Before long, the bust became one of the most celebrated works of ancient Egyptian art. It felt like the closest anyone would ever come to looking into Nefertiti's eyes. But the sculpture was hiding a secret, until modern technology made it possible to look inside the sculpture without damaging it. In 2008, a team led by radiologist Dr. Alexander Huppertz with Egyptologist Dietrich Wildung used high-resolution CT scans to examine the famous bust. What they found surprised everyone. Beneath the painted plaster was another face, a carefully carved limestone portrait with small wrinkles around the mouth and subtle differences between the eyes had hidden those imperfections for more than 3,000 years. The sculptor hadn't simply copied Nefertiti's face, he had perfected it. And that discovery raised an even bigger question. If the real face of Nefertiti had been hidden inside a sculpture all this time, then where was the queen herself? Researchers would have to look beyond the famous bust and into Egypt's royal family itself, the Egyptian bloodline. For more than a century, archaeologists have been trying to piece together Egypt's royal family. They excavated temples and even the Valley of Kings, all in an effort to reconstruct the royal family of ancient Egypt. And their biggest breakthrough came in 1881. Workers uncovered a hidden royal cache at Deir el-Bahari. Hidden inside that cache were the mummies of Egypt's greatest rulers, secretly reburied there by ancient priests to protect them from tomb robbers. And it was an extraordinary discovery. Among them were Sekenenre Tao, whose skull still carried the wounds that likely killed him, the king who drove the Hyksos out of Egypt. Archaeologists made another remarkable discovery. A second royal cache inside the tomb of Amenhotep II revealed even more members of Egypt's royal family. History's greatest pharaohs were found. Their identities were confirmed through inscriptions, through modern scientific examination. With every discovery, Egypt's royal family tree became a little clearer. No matter wherever the researcher looked, they couldn't find any signs of her. It was as though one of Egypt's most famous queens had simply vanished. And that is when they decided to test a new theory. What if Nefertiti had never truly disappeared? What if her tomb had already been found, but her identity had been lost? Perhaps she had been buried under another name. Digging for another tomb wouldn't solve the mystery. Researchers turned back to the discoveries they had already made. Several unidentified women from the 18th dynasty suddenly became the center of the investigation. None of them had a name, but one of them could be Queen Nefertiti. It was an exciting idea. After more than 3,000 years, how do you identify a mummy with no name? To answer that question, researchers would need some of the most advanced technology ever created, and use it to piece together a mystery that had remained unsolved for more than 3,000 years. Tracing back the lost queen. On October 9, 1817, Italian explorer Giovanni Battista Belzoni entered a small tomb deep inside the Valley of the Kings. Today, it is known as Cave 21. The tomb didn't seem especially important. Only 2 female mummies. Both had been badly damaged by ancient tomb robbers thousands of years earlier. Their faces had suffered heavy damage. Any objects that might have identified them had long since disappeared. Archaeologists could do little more than give them simple names. For more than 2 centuries, the two women attracted very little attention. As the mystery of Queen Nefertiti captured the world's attention, researchers began searching for every possible clue to her fate. The 2 anonymous women of KV-21 were no longer just unidentified mummies. The tomb lay inside the Valley of the Kings. Both women belonged to the 18th dynasty, and one of them, KV-21A, had been buried with her left arm folded across her chest, a position normally reserved for royal women. These were no longer just 2 anonymous mummies. They had become some of the strongest candidates for Queen Nefertiti. But there was one problem. How do you prove that an unidentified mummy is someone who lived more than 3,000 years ago? They couldn't simply perform a CT scan on these mummies, just like they had done with Nefertiti's bust. Because a CT scan could reveal bones. It could reconstruct a face. It could estimate the person's age, injuries, and health. But it couldn't tell researchers who that person actually was, into the DNA of these women. If even tiny fragments of ancient DNA had survived, scientists could compare them with other royal mummies and rebuild an entire family tree. Ancient DNA is incredibly fragile. Scientists carefully drilled tiny samples from dense bones and teeth, where traces of DNA were most likely to survive. Inside specially controlled laboratories, they removed modern contamination before extracting and analyzing the surviving genetic material. After years of painstaking work, scientists finally got the results. What they found was far beyond anything they had expected. The DNA results. In 2010, Egyptian researchers led by Dr. Zahi Hawass and geneticist Karsten Pusch published a landmark DNA study in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The team had analyzed 16 royal mummies from Egypt's 18th dynasty. They reconstructed much of Tutankhamun's family tree. The study confirmed several long-debated royal relationships, but it also revealed something no one had expected. Generation after generation, Egypt's rulers had been marrying their own close relatives. Brothers married sisters. Half-siblings married one another. Parents and children remained part of the same tightly connected bloodline. The goal was to preserve what they believed was a divine royal lineage. They had created the perfect conditions for harmful genetic mutations to accumulate over centuries. The DNA explained why Tutankhamun had suffered from fragile bones and numerous health problems despite becoming one of Egypt's most powerful pharaohs. The royal family wasn't simply collapsing because of political conflict. It may have already been collapsing from within. Researchers also tested DNA from KV-21A and KV-21B. But there was one major disappointment. The DNA had degraded too severely. Only a handful of genetic markers could be recovered. It simply wasn't enough to identify either woman with confidence. The search appeared to reach another dead end. But science didn't stop there. As DNA sequencing technology continued to improve, researchers were finally able to recover genetic material that older methods couldn't read. One mummy, KV-21B, suddenly became far more interesting. Scientists reconstructed her mitochondrial DNA, the type of DNA passed directly from mother to child. KV-21B shared the same maternal lineage as Tutankhamun. She belonged to his closest royal family. She could have been his mother, his aunt. When researchers combined those genetic findings with the archaeological evidence, many concluded that KV-21B had become one of the strongest candidates ever proposed for Queen Nefertiti. And then they performed another CT scan. This time, they weren't looking for identity. They were looking for how she died. The images revealed a disturbing pattern. Both arms had been broken and twisted into unnatural positions. Her rib cage had been crushed. One side of her skull showed a severe fracture consistent with a powerful blow. According to forensic specialists, these injuries were far more consistent with trauma around the time of death than with damage caused by thousands of years inside a tomb. But the mystery didn't end there. Researchers also examined tissue samples from mummies believed to belong to the royal family of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. They detected unusually high levels of toxic elements, including mercury. Scientists believe years of exposure to these substances could have weakened the body. It may have damaged the nervous system and increased the risk of illness. If Cave 21B truly belonged to this royal family, she may have been living with those effects long before she died. And when you put all of this evidence together, the picture became impossible to ignore. A woman closely related to Tutankhamun through her maternal line. A body bearing signs of severe trauma. Had scientists finally found Queen Nefertiti? The final verdict. If KV-21B really was Queen Nefertiti, then another question becomes even more important. The answer may lie in one of the greatest political reversals in ancient Egyptian history. After Akhenaten died around 1336 BCE, everything he had built began to disappear. His religious revolution collapsed. The temples dedicated to Aten were dismantled. The city of Akhenaten was abandoned. Stone blocks from its temples were broken apart and reused in new buildings. And Egypt's rulers began restoring the religion Akhenaten had tried to destroy. The living image of Amun. It was a public declaration that Egypt had returned to its traditional beliefs. Soon afterward, later pharaohs, including Horemheb, systematically erased Akhenaten's reign from history. His monuments were destroyed. His name disappeared from official king lists. Many Egyptologists believe that anyone closely associated with his religious revolution may have suffered the same fate. And no one was more closely associated with Akhenaten than Queen Nefertiti. She would have become part of the very dynasty that later kings wanted the world to forget. That could explain why no confirmed tomb bearing her name has ever been found. It could explain why no intact burial equipment identifies her. And it could explain why researchers have spent more than a century searching for a queen who simply seemed to vanish. Tomb robbers only made the mystery worse. Jewelry was stolen. Coffins were stripped. Mummies were damaged. Names and inscriptions disappeared forever. If KV-21B really was Nefertiti, any object that once identified her could easily have been lost. That is exactly why modern science became so important. Researchers could no longer rely on inscriptions alone. They turned to CT scans, ancient DNA. Those discoveries built a compelling case. A royal woman, closely related to Tutankhamun through her maternal lineage, buried in the Valley of the Kings, a body showing signs of severe trauma. None of those discoveries proves that KV-21B was Queen Nefertiti. They still fall short of absolute proof, without an inscription bearing her name or a complete genetic identification. Archaeologists cannot declare the mystery solved. But for the first time in more than 3,300 years, researchers are no longer searching in the dark. They are following real scientific evidence. And whether KV-21B ultimately proves to be Nefertiti or not, the woman history tried so hard to erase is slowly returning. Not through myths or legends, somewhere beneath the sands of Egypt. The final piece of the puzzle is still waiting to be found. For more than 3,300 years, Queen Nefertiti has remained one of history's greatest mysteries. Modern technology has revealed the face hidden beneath her famous bust. DNA has rebuilt the royal family she belonged to. CT scans have uncovered clues inside anonymous mummies that no archaeologist could have imagined just a few decades ago. The most important question still remains unanswered. Was KV-21b really Queen Nefertiti? Or is the real queen still lying undiscovered somewhere beneath the sands of Egypt, waiting for the next great archaeological breakthrough? Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next journey into history's greatest mysteries. We'll see you in the next video.